So as our first speaker, it's my very great pleasure to welcome up to the podium Howard Broad, who's the Deputy Chief Executive, Security and Intelligence Department of the Prime Minister in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. And so a very warm welcome, please, to Howard. Thank you very much.
And notwithstanding that we're in a digital age, as a former policeman, I am going to take you back in time a little bit to tell you a little bit about my connection with things that are in the digital age. I tell a story first. During the time of the Commission of Inquiry into Police Conduct, a time when the measure of public trust and confidence in the police had tanked by 10 to 13 points, I found myself in the old regional services space at the Auckland domestic air terminal. I was sitting waiting for a flight to Palmerston North, dressed in the full uniform of an Assistant Commissioner of Police, and I was looking at Ian Smith, seated opposite, the great New Zealand cricketer and television commentator, and I was wondering what it must be like to be such a recognisable face. At that time, a young mother came into the terminal. She was obviously in a state. She had with her an infant in a stroller and a curly-haired 2-year-old by the hand, bags of all description draped from the stroller. She spied me, rocked up and said, "Would you look after this lot for me, please?" And she promptly parked the stroller, the child, the other child, and shot out the door. I looked up and I saw Ian Smith's eyebrow wrinkle, shot up, and a smile broke onto his face, and I could imagine him thinking, how are you going to deal with this big fella? Of course, my flight to Palmerston was then called, followed by the final call. No sign of the young mother. I became resigned to missing the flight. Ian Smith was watching me closely, so were the 2 children. Just as the gate was about to close, she came back and without a word picked up her family and rushed off up the concourse. And I made my flight. What has this got to do with the Magna Carta? I imagine that you recognise this as a testament of trust. My uniform, a solid statement of state authority, meant something, sufficient for the young mother to place her trust in its wearer, no further questions. Trust and confidence speaks, in my view, to risk appetite in those who grant power and those who use it. Trust and confidence is critical for police. More than just being lawful, police action needs to be supported. Police commissioners hold office solely on the question of confidence. A police officer attending a pub fight knows all about confidence. Will the public turn on them or support them in resolving the incident? Trust inspires confidence and thus effective policing or not. More technically, note that the police have a duty to enforce the law but have discretion in how that occurs. This discretion is not unfettered. Decisions to prosecute or not can be challenged in a variety of ways. Therefore, every day in the courts and also every day in the court of public opinion, the police are judged on how they do their job. It has always been so. You know that modern policing traces its evolution back to London in 1829. Trust and confidence and the means of acquiring it was high on the mind of Sir Robert Peel when he then established the Metropolitan Police. He believed safety and security was best achieved by inspiring citizens to voluntarily comply with the law. And this is more likely if they participate and believe in the systems and people involved in enforcement. Peel's principles stitched together the means of such an ambition for policing. No army of occupation was to be created. Police officers were to be selected from citizens of integrity likely to maintain respect. Malpractice was not to be tolerated. Officers were to be identifiable and function in full public view, wearing uniforms of blue, not the red of the British Army, and commanded to use techniques that inspired cooperation, their mission to prevent crime and so to avoid or mitigate the need for arrests and prosecution, and use the minimum force or power in any situation requiring action. Further, to take no side, regardless of the position and standing of those who came to their notice, and to stay within their role, and particularly avoid the space reserved for lawmakers or the judiciary. Adhering to these principles, particularly balancing prevention against enforcement, has been a constant challenge. There's a lot more law, and more pressure to enforce them. It's easier to focus on and measure disclosed offences than the more opaque concept of prevented offences. 20th century policies that committed police to a rapid incident response and the rise of more effective detective techniques based on the forensic and analytical crime sciences has further emphasised the piecework side of policing rather than the relationship development side upon which prevention derives. There's no doubt short-term, vigorous to the point of harsh enforcement practice changes behaviour, but the public tires quickly of the stick and withdraws consent. The idea of the respected local police as the primary foil against criminal behaviour is hard to sustain in the face of determined criminal opposition which can isolate and pick on individual officers, undermining their willingness to work alone or be publicly identified. Obtaining consent from local communities is also more complicated as communities get larger, become more itinerant and more diverse. I think we're fortunate in New Zealand that governments have consistently set an ideal of good community-police relations. Legislation of recent times authorising the police had significant public input. Local engagement practices are now more sophisticated, police are more competent at tapping into public opinion, and there's less defensiveness. The primary policing strategy that's been cemented as one of prevention first, Peel would be proud of that. I think that it's admirable the police have steadfastly defended a policy of allowing officers involved in cases to speak publicly, thus making the police action more personal and accountable to the public. Although not all police would care to admit it, but they've been major beneficiaries of modern criminal disclosure and oversight regimes. The public examination of cases has dramatically improved accountability and consequently policy and procedure. Of course, the outing of poor practice and attitude is painful, but it remains my belief that the professional track of the police is a positive one. So to summarise, police get better if the public get to actively consent to policing, and particularly if they know who is responsible for the exercise of a power, why the power is required to be exercised, what risks require police intervention, that there are limitations on the power and that there are clear and objective systems that monitor that power, and that the citizen has options to deal with their perception the power was not exercised properly. Long lead in to a simple point, really. In respect of the police, the public do get answers to these questions. It follows that the police can be found wanting in cases, even suffer criticism of major strategic programs, but public support will hold up if the Peelite principles are promptly and genuinely respected. This translates into confidence and the willingness of the public to place their issues into the hands of the police for resolution and to remain amenable to the function of law enforcement systems and contribute to a community policing system. These principles, in my view, apply just about everywhere in public administration. But here I am now, as I'm not the police commissioner anymore, I'm the Deputy Chief Executive of Security Intelligence responsible for the national security system. I have day-to-day contact with national security agencies, and in particular, I'm involved with the intelligence agencies, the Government Communications Security Bureau and the New Zealand Security Intelligence Service. These agencies, on the grounds of national security, have the authority of the state to access and acquire personal information and information about organisations that are deemed of security interest. Applying the Peelite principles to security organisations is a little more problematical. Although the source of authority to exercise power is statute-based, mostly the individual exercise of powers is an administrative one and a tightly held secret. Although the purpose of the organisations are known and publicly discussed, meaningful discussion of the specific risks that they deal with have been discouraged for the advantage such discussion provides adversaries. The identities of the agency's officials and their tradecraft are secret for the same reason. The operational significance of cases doesn't end when the case is disposed of. The competition in which the state might have engaged, that might have focused on individuals, typically is a response to a challenge to our state's integrity by a rather more generally described adversary that takes a long-run view of the battle. Traditionally, the organisations, the security organisations, have taken the view that the less said is the better. And in operational terms, this might seem justifiable. knowing the purpose, strategy and capability of our security agencies does provide advantage to those who seek to avoid detection of their harmful actions. Even oversight was seen as problematical. Knowledge of actions taken by the state in its own defence was tightly held, and security has been an interest considered to outweigh the usual programs of transparent planning, budgeting and performance reporting required in a parliamentary democracy. Recent history shows that the traditional settings around national security to have been inadequate. When allegations about the practices of the security agencies are published, the public has great difficulty making its judgments about confidence in these circumstances. But times are changing. Whereas in the past, you would have only heard about the security agencies when things have gone wrong, they now provide more information on their, publicly about their work, about the systems of oversight and their policies. Check out their websites. They're regularly updated. They take up public speaking opportunities. They make their directors more visible and accessible to media and to the public. They provide greater detail in planning, budgeting and other accountability documents, and they publicly appear before the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament during annual reviews. These agencies also use opportunities to assure the public that what they do is proportionate, authorised and otherwise lawful. You don't just have to take their word for it though, they're subject to much stronger and more independent oversight, and this is welcomed. The 2013 legislative changes brought about a significantly expanded and strengthened Inspector General of Intelligence and Security Office. There's a full-time inspector, a deputy and a team of investigators who deal not only with complaints but also reviews that they themselves decide. They've been increasingly open with the work they do, and the agencies themselves even have their own Twitter account. There are also to be regular reviews of these agencies. The first such review is being conducted by Sir Michael Cullen and Dame Patsy Reddy, and this week published a set of questions asking the public what they thought about the policy settings around these agencies. These and ongoing changes, we believe, will lead to a more informed public and build up awareness and understanding of the work these agencies do, leading to increased trust and confidence. In my view, we're on the way to national security by consent. Consent, though, that needs constant attention so that it strikes at the appropriate point between security and privacy. Therefore, that young mother who once tackled me in relation to her personal family safety and security should be able to feel confident that that's the same that she should feel about her country and the security of her family, and that the security agencies are part and parcel of providing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Howard, for setting that scene of the new framework and how that's been developing since the 2013 Act.